Because you just mixed up a whole bunch of stuff there.
No, I didn't.
Where does fentanyl come from?
It comes from many places.
Where does
But
where does 90% of the fentanyl
that
comes
it was
into?
coming through
Where does
the
it come
southern
from?
border?
Where does it come from?
In which
Do you
the
know?
Democrats allowed.
So where does it come from?
The Democrats allowed the
Does it
southern
come
border
from
to be open,
Venezuela
yes
or
no?
not?
Abby Phillip finally had enough of MAGA, of their propaganda, of their lies on her CNN show. We're going to take a look at clips of a panel on Abby Phillip's show discussing the ongoing strikes from the Trump administration on Venezuelan fishing boats and all of the lies and misinformation that MAGA are spreading over that on shows like Abby Phillip's. Abby Phillip was joined by Anna Navarro. Things got very heated. I want to share my thoughts on this. Let's check it out together.
The story keeps shifting. Tonight, there's growing scrutiny about the U.S. military's follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat in the Caribbean. It is exposing holes in the Trump administration's explanations of what happened. Now, try to follow along here. The attack happened on September 2nd, and reports say that there were survivors, and someone ordered what they call a double-tap strike on those survivors. The White House maintains its boat bombing operation is to crack down on illegal drugs coming to the United States, which leads to this contradiction. Where exactly were these drugs headed?
These particular drugs were probably headed to Trinidad or some other country in the Caribbean. This one was operating in international waters, headed towards the United States to flood our country with poison.
Contradiction number 2. Listen as Pete Hegseth describes watching the strikes and who was targeted.
I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing.
But lawmakers later said that Trump officials revealed they did not know the identities of those involved. And just yesterday, Hegseth backtracked on his own story, claiming he did not stick around long enough to watch how it all unfolded.
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand because the thing was on fire. It was exploded in fire or smoke. You can't see anything.
But there is new reporting from the Washington Post that suggests it may not have taken hours for the smoke to clear and for those 2 survivors to come into focus, despite Hegseth saying that it was hours later and he couldn't stick around long enough to see the end of that strike. This story is a little perplexing because this is September, by the way, September 2nd. It's been months now. And they can't seem to get their story straight. They can't seem to figure out what they're going to say. And I actually think that very first clip that we played of Marco Rubio, where he said initially that it was not going to the United States, it was going to Trinidad or some other country. And then he corrected himself to kind of get in line with what the administration was saying. That's one of the most telling to me. That they know that they need to have a particular narrative about this. Otherwise, there would be some questions that perhaps Congress would raise.
Well, the questions is that it's illegal if you know that there are survivors who are not a threat to anyone to then just go and kill them. So that's against the military law. So they have to make sure that that's not the narrative. They have to make sure that the ship isn't bombed, that they know that, and then they see people who are alive there, but like incapacitated. Not that they're there with a machine gun and trying to kill somebody else. You're not supposed to just kill the survivors. So they have to make sure that no one intentionally killed survivors. Now, what they're saying now is that the admiral, they are admitting, I believe, that there was a second strike, and that was not Pete Hegseth's call. It was the admiral's call to say, the boat's not wiped out. There are people in there and they can continue on forward. And so they're saying, look, it wasn't us. And look, you know what happens, Abby, especially when the camera comes on, right? Hegseth's on his old show, Fox and Friends, and he's like, I saw the whole thing. It's a human instinct to say I was there and I supervised it. And did he, didn't he? I don't know. It's probably easy to tell whether
Arthur,
he was.
He should have watched the whole thing. He's the Secretary of Defense. This was the first strike against such a boat. Look, I think the reason they're having such a hard time keeping their narrative straight is because this is a completely fabricated narrative. When Marco Rubio said that this boat was heading towards Trinidad and Tobago, he was actually saying the truth. Most of the drugs that travel through Venezuela go through the Caribbean and end up in Europe. Most of the drugs that come to the United States come through the Pacific coast, up of Central America and Mexico. The fentanyl that is killing tens of thousands of Americans is coming through Mexico. But in order for them to justify what they are doing in Venezuela, they have to have a reason. They have to have a narrative.
The question I have is, what are they doing in Venezuela, and why?
Well, I'll tell you what they're doing in
Venezuela.
Venezuela. They are
A lot of us
attempting regime change. Nicolas Maduro is a horrible human being. He is a dictator. He is anti-American. He has destabilized the entire region. But they can't call it regime change because that in turn would require congressional approval.
Stopped all flights, right? Didn't they stop all
the other
flights
thing
now
is,
to
I want to,
Venezuela?
there's a lot of bipartisan concern about this, and I think the Republicans on Capitol Hill who are raising concerns, their voices are pretty crystal clear in all of this. And I should note that the admiral that you're talking about, he's going to be testifying about his side of this story this week, tomorrow. So let's play with the Republican Congress people who've been critical of this, what they've been saying lately.
There is a question of the legality of bombing people who are shipwrecked or incapacitated. I frankly think it's absolutely illegal.
We don't kill two survivors who are not posing an imminent threat to anybody. Doesn't sound good. And if somebody actually did this, they should be held accountable.
Our men and women get in situations where they may be blown out of the water. And we're putting our forces at risk if we're setting or lowering the bar for actually honoring the rules of engagement. Our reputation matters, and the bar that we set, you can argue, is going to be the top level of expectation for our peers and for our allies and our adversaries.
So, Harrison, they're pretty clear that this is not about the drug. Nobody wants to defend drug traffickers, but what they're doing is defending Americans who might be put in similar situations.
Well, I'm glad you said that no one wants to defend drug traffickers, because that's what it seems that the Democratic Party is doing.
What about
this
these
is the
Republicans?
same thing they did with the Maryland father of four.
But what about these Republicans, Rand Paul, Don Bacon, Tom Tillis? You heard
these are the same characters that will always do this. But the reality is, this is all manufactured. This is all manufactured. If you listen to you and if you listen to some of these other people, you think they're taking out Theo's fishing boat or a Royal Caribbean cruise. These are designated
Did you listen to anything that was said in those clips?
Designated narco-terrorists that are coming to this country.
Did you listen to anything that was said in the clips?
Yes, I did.
Did you listen, as Tom Tillis says,
and it's all
our men and women,
they have
hold on, no, not whataboutism.
Yes, it is.
He says our men and women get into situations where they may be blown out of the water. And we are putting our forces at risk.
Let's talk about what's
if we're
actually
setting
happening.
or lowering the bar for actually honoring rules of engagement.
That's all great, but that's all hypothetical. Let's talk about what's actually happening.
And the good thing is, can we just take a beat?
You have the Department of War briefing these members.
Address the basic, this is not a partisan dispute, right?
Not at
That's
all.
one of the reasons I played this, because it's not about partisanship. It's about how do we want to be treated on the world stage. And I assume
and when you ask our European
about
allies,
how
they're celebrating what this president is doing.
Hold on a second.
Because to Anna's point,
Harrison,
it's protecting Europe.
That
and if you
was
ask
also
the American people...
hold on, that's also in question.
Yes.
There was reporting just a couple of weeks ago that the British has stopped sharing intelligence with us
exactly right.
because they were concerned about the legality of these strikes. So, but again, put that aside for just a moment. Do you think it is a legitimate concern whether or not, we don't know exactly all the details, but whether or not there was something done in this instance that might have been a violation of the law? Are you concerned about that at all?
If there were violations, that will of course come out, but that is not what's happening.
But if there are violations, would that concern you?
The same would have been true when Obama was striking people left and right, and I didn't see CNN or anyone else complaining then. We all have to have a standard. We have the laws on the books.
Every single night.
We have
and
the
the
laws
answer
on the
is
books.
that Obama's drone strikes were incredibly controversial. They were covered extensively by CNN, by all the mainstream outlets.
And I didn't hear a single
I'm not sure you were
Democrat
around
complain.
for it. I was around for it. It was controversial.
I was a
okay? Right. That's what I thought. It was controversial at the time.
And there were Democrats that did complain
this is
about
not
that.
something that I think there's clear bipartisan concern about this because, again, when we talk about war is not just a one-sided thing.
That's exactly right.
It is something that we can be subject to as a nation. And we create these rules. We created the rules. And then for us to violate them, I think that is why you're seeing some Republicans concerned.
Well, Abby,
I love that Harrison Fields tries to say to Abby Phillip, oh, you're just doing whataboutism. And then he throws out, well, what about Obama? I mean, and they say this, I don't know how many times I've heard this in the last few weeks. Well, what about when Obama was doing drone strikes? I didn't hear any Democrats complaining about that. actual people on the left, actual commentators and pundits and actual people on the left, I would not put CNN in the category of the left or the Democratic Party establishment as the left, but actual progressives criticized Obama all the time during his administration over his drone strikes. So it's funny to me, Harrison Fields doing the typical MAGA thing that they do every night on Abby Phillip's show, where it's all about whataboutism, and then he's complaining to Abby Phillip about whataboutism. And again, this is another guy where I wish he would just cut his mic, because he is talking over Abby Phillip as she's trying to get her points in. And we're going to see more as we go along, but everything with MAGA, again, I see this all the time on Abby Phillip's show, where facts are presented. Anna Navarro, to me, one of the most reasonable people in the country, is saying fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela. These drugs are not coming to the United States from Venezuela. But the MAGA people go on Abby Phillip's show every night, and it's just, well, that's just your opinion, man. I don't agree with that. Everything with MAGA is an opinion when they're presented with facts, because they don't have the facts to back up their side, so they're going to try to just steamroll Abby Phillip and anyone else who actually presents reality.
You are spot on. Listen, in the end of the day, the rule of the law has to be paramount. It has to be paramount. And it has to be the rules of engagement that we want applied to the other side, but that will also be applied to us. And right now, it is sad to see where we are. It used to be when Republicans were in charge of the administration. I was assured that, even folks like Dick Cheney would understand where the line was as it relates to war crimes and not stepping over that line. Right now,
but you realize President Trump in the last 24 hours,
nicely of the dead.
President Trump in the last 24 hours has made it very, very clear that he himself had nothing to do with it.
It's CYA right now in the White House. This is complete CYA. This is complete CYA.
Can I tell you what I think is going on here? I think Trump thought that he could scare Maduro out of Venezuela. That if he started bombing from, sending bombs to some Venezuelan boats, if he started sending some USS carriers to the coast of Venezuela, Maduro, like many dictators before him, would be afraid, figure out how he could take his money, his family, get on a plane and flee to some place in exile for the rest of his life. It hasn't worked. And so now we are facing the very reality of, okay, now Donald Trump and this government is completely invested in getting Maduro out. We've got 1/4 of the arsenal of the U.S. Navy parked off the coast of Venezuela.
Protecting American interests.
What is the American interest? Oil?
Drugs pouring into this country and killing us?
Most drugs do not come through Venezuela. Then why aren't you bombing Mexico?
So we closed the southern border, and that did a really good job. Stop. That's a ridiculous argument.
No, you stop.
No, that's a ridiculous argument.
No, you're the one being ridiculous.
The president you advocated for 4 years, Joseph R. Biden, allowed our border to be open.
I'm not
gaslighting. Did Joe Biden let in tons and tons and tons? Well, tell that to the families of fentanyl families who have died.
No fentanyl comes from Venezuela.
It comes from the southern border.
No Mexico.
Hold on a second.
If your argument that drugs are not coming from Colombia or Venezuela to America.
Oh, I am going to argue that no fentanyl is coming from Venezuela.
Talk to the DEA.
No, you are wrong. And you are lying to the American people. You are part of the fabricating a narrative that doesn't exist.
Hold on a second.
Well, your day job is The View, so let's talk about fabricating.
And you have no day job. You just lost yours.
Harrison, you are wrong.
I'm not wrong.
Yes,
you're wrong. Because you just mixed up a whole bunch of stuff there.
No, I didn't.
Where does fentanyl come from?
It comes from many places.
Where does 90% of the fentanyl that comes
into coming through the southern border?
Where does it come from?
In which the Democrats allowed.
So where does it come from?
The Democrats allowed the southern border to be open. Does it come from Venezuela or not? It comes from many places. Do you know for a fact that fentanyl is not coming from Venezuela?
Okay.
To his point, though.
So no, Arthur.
So you're an expert on where the drugs are coming from.
Hold on a second. There's the reason I'm asking you this is because I'm
0% of fentanyl
I'm trying to gauge. You know what I'm trying to gauge? Do you know what I'm trying to gauge? I'm trying to gauge whether you're willing.
I think about this. 0% of the fentanyl in America comes from America. Okay, so that means it had to have come from Venezuela? I mean, What a ridiculous argument. I mean, how does someone actually... You think Harrison Fields leaves the show afterwards and is just like, oh, yeah, I got him with that one?
To just state basic facts, you're willing to listen, and it sounds like you're not willing to do either of those things in this moment.
You can't even say that fentanyl can and does come from Venezuela.
Hold on a second. What Anna said was that a majority...
It doesn't come.
Are you going to listen or not?
Are you going to
A majority of the fentanyl comes from Mexico. Is that true or false?
Let's say it's true, but Abby, here's where the problem comes in.
Hold on, Arthur.
It's the fentanyl gets cut, the cocaine gets cut with the fentanyl.
Arthur, hang on a second. Arthur, hang on a second. Let's say it's true or false. It is true that a majority of the fentanyl comes from Mexico.
Correct.
Here's the other thing that is true.
That's true.
It is also true that a majority of the cocaine that comes to the United States is not coming through the Caribbean channel.
Correct.
So I'm curious about whether you're willing to acknowledge facts or not, or if you're just more committed to your talking points.
If our intelligence community is saying that these are narco-terrorists with the desire to come to America and to bring drugs into this country, it is within the president's prerogative. Don't you think they should provide a shred
of evidence to that point?
Yes. Have you talked to members of Congress who have had these classified briefings?
Should they not provide evidence that those drugs that they know for a fact that those drugs were coming to the United States? There are a lot of legitimate questions about whether that is true. You had Rand Paul, a Republican, saying that the distance between Venezuela and Miami is so great that there is no way that these little fisher boats would end up in Miami. So these are legitimate questions.
I'm not saying the questions can't be asked.
There are factual issues with your assertion that the fentanyl crisis is being caused by Venezuela, when we know for a fact that that is not the case.
If you're going to stand here today
to
and say that Venezuela is not
really says
responsible
more about your commitment
for
to
drugs
talking points than it says about your commitment
so
to
if you want to defend Maduro and the country of Venezuela,
because we got a lot more going on. But I don't want to argue
I don't think
about
you want
talking
to be defending
points.
Maduro.
I want to argue
I don't think
about
you want to be
facts. And there is not a single person at this table, my friend, who is arguing in defense
you
of
are doing
Maduro.
more to defend
so please do
whether or
not
not Venezuela is sending drugs to this country.
And we're going to go on to the next topic.
I don't know how Abby Phillip does this every night. I mean, I'm sure she's paid very well. I don't know what she's paid to be on CNN. I think she does an excellent job. But imagine it's just like dealing with people online, crazy MAGA people online who are completely immune to facts. They just throw out whatever talking points they want to. Abby Phillip tries repeatedly to pin him down on where the drugs are actually coming from in terms of fentanyl, which is not Venezuela. And Harrison Fields does this. I've seen Scott Jennings do this. The other MAGA pundits that go on here, Batia Ungar-Sargon and the rest. It's just like if they believe something strongly enough, then it's true. If I believe strongly enough that all these people in these fishing boats are narco-terrorists just because my God King, Donald Trump, says so, and there's no actual evidence presented of that. We don't know who any of these people are. No names are released or anything like that. But just because I believe it, it makes it so. That to me is the basic tenet of MAGA, is just having faith. You have faith that your leader is correct about everything. Doesn't matter what the facts show. Doesn't matter what evidence is presented or not presented. My leader says this, and I believe everything that he says, and thus it's real. And Abby Phillip or any other actual journalist can present all the facts in the world, and MAGA is going to shoot that down because they don't understand the difference between opinions and facts. You know, it's like they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. Because Donald Trump said that, then that became suddenly true to all of MAGA and all of these pundits that go on shows like Abby Phillip's. There was no evidence of that. You can talk to people in that community and they will say, and I've talked to people in that community repeatedly, and they will say, yeah, there's no evidence of that. But because Donald Trump said so, then it's a fact to MAGA. And the same thing with these Venezuelan fishing boats. Abby Phillip makes a great point there that Rand Paul brought out. They're no threat to us. They can't get to our country. They'd have to refuel 20 times or something like that to get to our country. And are they even making any attempt to get to the United States? No. But Ana Navarro, she probably makes the best point in all of this, that this has nothing to do with the drugs. You know, this asshole, Harrison Fields, tries to make out like Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro and the rest are just like, oh, we don't care about, who cares about drugs? Who cares if drugs are killing people? No one's saying that. But you can't just pick a country out of thin air and say, well, drugs are coming to the United States, so I guess it must be Venezuela that's doing it. I mean, it's just insanity. How do people even, we just had Thanksgiving in the United States, and do you have family members that you had to deal with at Thanksgiving if you're in the United States that were saying nonsense like this? And how do you deal with people who are just completely immune? How do you deal with people who are completely immune to facts? And how do you just not throw up your hands and say, this is pointless, to even try to communicate to people, with people who do nothing but spin and twist themselves into logic pretzels and do mental gymnastics to defend their point of view with no reality or facts to back it up? And how do we recover from this as a country? I mean, that worries, Donald Trump's going to be gone eventually, hopefully. But these people are still going to be around. How do we move on from that as a people? Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. Are you on the side of Abby Phillip and Ana Navarro, to me, the side of rationality? Or are you on the side of Harrison Fields and these other MAGA types who go on Abby Phillip's program every night and just do nothing but spew propaganda with no basis in reality at all? Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris on Culture, and I'll see you in the next video.